Let's bring in our next guest now, Alexis Cubit, joining us, a Baylor alum. So first of all, SMU fans, be nice out there. I know, SMU doesn't have bragging rights over Baylor, but I'm sure you enjoyed that game. That was a wild one here in Dallas, but now covering Louisville, of course, which is really why we're here. But congrats on your Baylor Bears at least having bragging rights over SMU.
I was going to say, we're just going to pretend like this past weekend never happened, and we're going to focus on that win.
Well, look, now SMU fans have a double reason for them to be mad at Dave Aranda and the Bears, dishing them the loss and then unable to get it past TCU. That's something we can at least, lock arms over.
Yeah, exactly.
But you did have quite the time down there in Miami covering that Louisville-Miami game. Louisville coming out with the win. Jeff Brohm, I kind of talked about it, gave my take earlier on the show. But Jeff Brohm, his ability to get his teams ready for these top 10 opponents, these big games, even though people are sleeping on them, they were, I think, 13.5-point dogs in this one. That was a huge number to begin with. They get it done. They beat Miami. What is it about his process that makes them so ready every single time they take the field?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is it just seems like Jeff just really gets up for those big games. I mean, even if you go back to his Purdue days, he has, several wins over, top 5, top 10 opponents. It's just, I think it's that underdog, mentality where they do really well when they're not expected to win games, right? Like, you think about 2 years ago, when they went in there and beat Miami to clinch the ACC championship spot. First time in program history for a win at Miami and to go to that ACC championship game. You think last year when they beat Clemson in Death Valley, which doesn't look as impressive these days, but that's beside the point. Still, they had never done it before. So that's the thing about it. And then this year, like you said, they were counted out 13.5-point underdogs. Then right before, kickoff, it went to 10.5. And then by halftime, it was like 2.5. So clearly the bettors knew something that, maybe the Johnny come latelys were there. But no, I think the thing is, again, like the underdog mentality and really throwing things at Miami that they were not expecting, which I think a couple players said during post game, putting 3 quarterbacks in, running Wildcat with Colin Lacey and having even more plays that they didn't even run. And that was just the first drive. You know what I mean? And then as far as defense, I have been saying this all season. This defense does not get enough credit. Last year, they were ready to fire Ron English. This year, they're quiet.
Yeah. I was, as not to interrupt, but I listened to the post-game radio show leaving Louisville after covering that SMU game, and that was all it was fire on English. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, absolutely. What's crazy is I had someone who literally said after the Virginia game, "Oh, defense gave up a touchdown." I'm like, they gave up 1 touchdown in regulation. You know what I mean? And so they gave up a the field goal. If you give up 10 points only in a game, chances are you win. But I'm just glad that they were able to have the spotlight that they were on a Friday night ESPN game. Carson Beck came in with 3 picks, had 4, almost 5 in that game. So, it's nice to see that defense, get that shine.
And I think for me, watching this Louisville team, for the last 2 years, they have athletes. They have guys that can play in the NFL. It's all about that consistency, right? That's why it's great that they can have the top 10 wins, but they've all really come as an unranked team. So putting that all together has been, the challenge. And it's a challenge for a lot of teams across college football week in, week out. But one of the athletes that has really emerged is Chris Bell. His performance against Miami, unbelievable. You mentioned Colin Lacey. There was a ton of expectation around this passing attack with Miller Moss coming in. What has Chris Bell meant to this team as of late? And then where is Miller Moss in that development piece as he looks to be kind of that next great Jeff Brohm quarterback?
Yeah. So starting off with Chris Bell, it's so funny because I had someone who asked me where Chris Bell transferred in from. I said, no, and it's a testament to the era that we're living in, but the fact that he is Louisville through and through, freshman, sophomore, junior, now senior year, is really a testament to the kind of young man that he is. There were rumors that schools were offering him multi-million dollars to transfer during the offseason. And he decided to stay at Louisville. I don't know what the counteroffer was with the Cardinals, but that's beside the point. The point is that he has been a guy who has been at one school for all 4 years, was not the star for 3 of them. He was always kind of that little extra, or that little complimentary piece. But the biggest thing for Chris, he's always been talented. I want to say that, big body, baby face, but very physical. But the thing for him was just the maturity factor. And he talked about during the offseason how he had to really learn how to control his emotions, because he knew this was his last shot. A senior year, he really has to put good tape together to get to the NFL, which obviously he will. So it starts off the field for him, and just that maturity factor. I don't think that gets talked about enough, as far as these athletes learning how to be mature, carry themselves with poise, not get caught up too much in emotion, but tailoring that emotion toward, the game. So that's really where it starts. And then after that, everything else just kind of was able to shine, because he was able to, not get those dumb penalties, not throw water bottles at Kentucky fans, all of those things.
Who
And then
doesn't want to do that, though?
fair. Fair. I think Kentucky fans want to throw water bottles at Kentucky fans these days.
Yeah.
Um, and then as far as Miller Moss goes, Miller has had an interesting journey. Resilient is probably the best way to describe him. It does something to your confidence when you get benched at a school like USC, with 3 games left in the regular season. Then you come to another school, you think you're going to have this, run game that you can depend on, so you don't have to pass as much. And then your running backs get hurt. So now you have to, not only are you thrust into a new system, but you're having to adjust what you just learned as far as that new system. And it has not been good. I mean, he had 3 games where he threw for pick sixes. That's not great, but he was able to really, I think, take this bye week and kind of recalibrate a little bit. Obviously, Miami was going to have a huge defense that everybody has been talking about. And this was an opportunity for him to really kind of get it together. And then the other thing, too, is I think he had help with the offensive line. Shout out to them. They played a lot better. I think Ruben Bain only had 1 tackle, which is insane. They didn't get to him much. He didn't throw any interceptions. So, yeah, it's just a learning curve. And I think for him, he needed this game, like you said, as a pick-me-up. Definitely depending on those receivers, had a little bit more help in the run game with Isaac Brown looking a lot healthier than he's looked in almost a month. But yeah, I think this can do a lot for Miller's confidence in terms of, he wasn't perfect, but he did just enough to be able to win, 2 passing touchdowns, 1 more rushing. So this is definitely big for him, and in terms of his confidence and his growth at this point in the season.
And Isaac Brown, I'm glad you brought him up. I mean, he's been one of the most dynamic players in the ACC. For him not to be healthy earlier this year, I'm sure that was a big piece
For sure.
to the puzzle, with that loss at Virginia, when you don't have a guy as healthy as he is at that level. I mean, it makes a difference. There's no doubt about it. And so they're going to look to, overcome that now that he's healthy and kind of roll the rest of the way. You look at the schedule, next 3 games: Boston College, Virginia Tech, Cal, only one of those on the road, at Virginia Tech. And then it's Clemson, SMU, 1, of course, at Louisville, and then they come to SMU. And then, of course, Kentucky doesn't matter for the ACC world, but it could matter for college football playoff implications, of course, to end the season. They've got that one at home as well. This schedule, how do you kind of see it playing out the rest of the way, assuming kind of healthy, kind of similar? Do you think they have what it takes to navigate this and be a 1-loss team entering that final weekend that is kind of sitting pretty, maybe hoping for some chaos and things like that?
Yeah, I was talking to a colleague, and we were looking at the schedule, and we are saying, this really could be a 1-loss team. This really could be 11-1. The caveat is there's always something, right, Billy?
Right.
Jeff Brohm has been a giant slayer, if you will, in terms of those top 5, top 10 wins. The game after, however, is the one that he has always lost. Again, going back to Miami last year or 2 years ago, right after that was the Pitt loss. Beating Clemson last year, right after that was the Stanford loss.
That was bad.
Yes, it was very confusing as well. So But the difference is, as someone pointed out, those games were on the road. Boston College is at home. So you have to figure that does factor into, the comfort level of not having to travel. You get to keep your excitement in one place, not on a plane ride. Um, so I think they're like a 23-point favorite against Boston College, which after they got beat by UConn, fair. And like you said, Virginia Tech obviously doesn't even have a head coach right now. Um, Cal could be tricky. Cal could
Yeah.
definitely be tricky with the way they're playing it and the quarterback that they have this year. But no, I definitely see this as a very winnable schedule. You don't have to go to Death Valley. Like you said, Clemson comes to Louisville, which is huge in terms of just that home field advantage, because Louisville has not lost many games at home during Jeff Brohm's tenure. So no, we very well, and that's the crazy thing, but thinking about the fact that this really could be an 11-1 team when I had them at maybe 8 or 9 losses, because I just, not just because I'm on the show, but I didn't have them beating Miami, Clemson, and SMU in the same season. But
Yeah.
if they can put together the game plan they put against the number 2 team in the country, the way that Miami's playing in Miami, I mean, as Kevin Garnett said, anything is possible.
Yeah. It's going to ride on Miller Moss's shoulders, I think. Having Isaac Brown healthy, great, huge confidence booster for a quarterback when you have somebody who could run the ball like that. But I think Miller is going to need to carry this team in a couple of these games. You look at that SMU game looming, one of the better run defenses in the conference. Just leave it to me, on that, the knowledge of that. But that secondary is super leaky. They'll have a chance to throw it around the yard pretty well there in Dallas. But Miller's going to have to step up, and he did step up against Miami this past weekend. A very efficient game for him. That's got to be something he can build off of. And if they do that, they can end up in Charlotte. This ACC championship picture is gotten a little clearer with Miami going down, leaving only 3 teams unbeaten. Do you see Louisville ending up in Charlotte to play for an ACC championship?
I want to say yes, but I just think that Virginia loss has been just a chink in the armor. Virginia has a very winnable schedule. If you look at that, they don't really play anybody that's at the top of the league right now, if I'm not mistaken. It hurts that they don't play Georgia Tech because there's no head-to-head with them. Louisville doesn't play Georgia Tech, and that head-to-head would have been important. So I think to a certain extent, their destiny is in their own hands, but you still need some help from Virginia's opponents. So if Virginia can get one, a loss, 2 losses, 3 losses, I think Louisville can end up in Charlotte. But I do think that Virginia game is going to be just kind of looming on their shoulders as far as just that one thing. So I want to say yes, but I just think that Virginia's schedule is so winnable that I don't see them losing a game. So that's really the biggest thing.
And I think too, my worry is that somewhere in those final 5 games, there's a misstep for Louisville. Just because they haven't done it yet, and when you haven't done something and gotten over the hill on certain things, it's kind of like Miami now. Is they've got 1 loss. Well, we've seen this story before. Is this going to end up with another loss that kicks
Yeah.
Miami out of the ACC championship, like we've kind of seen these last few years? So it's a hard hill to climb, but we do know that Clemson won't be taking a spot from anyone this year. So that's something that certainly changes things up.
Yeah, no, I think that's the thing. It's funny because Miami fans were just imploding, and I'm like, maybe it's because it was this early in the year, but
Right.
Miami has always kind of faltered. Look at last year with Syracuse and Fran Brown helping Dabo out.
Yeah.
So I think it was just the earlier part of the years where Miami fans just kind of struggled with getting a loss at that point. Had this been, maybe 2 weeks from now, they're like, okay, we're back to normal. But I think it was a time of year that it happened.
Well, great stuff, Alexis. We really appreciate you jumping on with us, and best of luck the rest of the way. Safe travels when you get on the road, and we appreciate you coming on, and we'll be sure to have you back.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Billy. See you in Dallas.
Yeah, sounds good. See you then.